Well, good evening everyone, and it's been a very busy and frustrating day working on the Golf GTI. Real achievement in getting the seat upholstered and back in the car. Real negative in the gear selection problems. So I've gone back to modelling a few things after dinner and after the kids are in bed. So this is the Geran-2 or geranium drone. Commonly known in the West as the Shahid-136. This is Planet model from the Czech Republic's 1 in 70-second kit. It's a kind of multimedia kit. You have to add the pit-up probes on from wire. The actual body of the drone is a resin casting. The engine is 3D printed. The fins are 3D printed. And the trolley is plastic moulding, injection moulding. So here we go, I'll turn it on the side so you can see what's underneath. So underneath the Geran-2 drone, or the Shahid-136, is the launch rocket. So the launch rocket appears to very simply just lift it off, and then after that the engine will of course take over. Now these are GLONASS guided bombs. So that's the equivalent of the Russian GPS system, GLONASS, and it has a warhead in there. Very simple device, reminds me of a Vulcan really, a propeller driven Vulcan bomber. There we go, a lovely little kit. Now firstly, I am not going to be doing this in Russian markings or Iranian markings. One, I don't want to lose my job, and two, I'm not really a fan of doing stuff in Russian markings. So I do have Russian enemy forces, but they are the Marmatians, a what-if state where Mozambique is, because of course I model the Malagasy army. So really I'm kind of torn as to what markings it should be in and whether it should be in any. Obviously I do not condone the use of the any military tool, be it NATO or Russian, to attack civilians. So I'll make that very clear. If a country is committing war crimes, I believe that they should be called out for it. So just as I advise people not to put swastikas on their Panzer Kampfwagen Offs G Mark 5 Panzer Kampfwagen 5 Panther Offs G. Leave the swastikas out, please. I'm not going to be putting Russian markings or Zs on it. I don't want it to be misconstrued. Now what I'm going to do is set the geranium or the Geran-2 Shahid-136 in context and talk about how it's used and what it's used for. And if you are just interested in models and have no further interest in war studies, look away. If you do want to know how these are being used, well, I'll try and tell you. So we'll put that to one side. This is a good sort of display deck that I managed to get from eBay. It just helps display the models a bit more nicely till I'm able to build the airfield in the loft. So now let's talk about the Geran-2 Shahid-136, and firstly we'll start off with Clausewitz. So war is a continuation of politics by other means, and the objective of war is to disarm your opponent and compel them to do your will. Paraphrase there of Clausewitz. Clausewitz, a great war theorist, someone that I advise anyone to read and reread multiple times. Very good. In my opinion, better than Sun Tzu. So I'm going to keep my opinions personal. These are not my professional opinions. This is non-political. This is based on factual analysis and my understanding of war. I'm speaking as a historian, so I'll be trying not to be emotive and I'll be trying to be objective. I will be disabling comments. If you want to go and put hateful comments about other people or other political systems, my channel is not the place to do so. So obviously we're in a situation where the Geran-2 drone is being used, and there it is in the Book of Armament in the naughty corner. Now, Putin has obviously made the choice to invade Ukraine. Whether that's a war of aggression, a crime of aggression, will be for the courts and the United Nations Security Council to resolve. But he started it. And really, we have to understand the Geran-2, the Shahid-136 drone in the context of what it's being used for. And again, I'm not condoning war crimes in any way. If a state wants to commit war crimes, then I believe it should face the justice of the courts. So Putin has started this war. They call it special military operation. And he has a choice now. He can escalate all the way to World War III, or he can continue the war as an attritional war. Russia can go to war with NATO, or it can grind down Ukraine via a war of attrition. And the situation is like two boxers. So Russia has tried the knockout blow, the uppercut, and because of NATO aid and the resistance of Ukraine, it's failed. So it's not in a situation where it can or will be able to achieve a knockout blow. So here we have on the left Ukraine fighting back, slightly smaller in resources, of course, than Russia. And on the right we have Russia throwing some punches. Now what's keeping Ukraine in the fight is aid from NATO and aid from the EU and from countries that support Ukraine. What's keeping Russia in the fight is aid and trade from Iran, China. So we've got trade in RMB or yuan. We've got trade between Iran and Russia, and drones and other technologies coming in. So both of these boxes are effectively punching the living daylights out of each other, and there's NATO giving Ukraine some water, and the fight is continuing. Not in a position where any of them can achieve a knockout blow. Those days are long gone. And Russia is trying to keep Ukraine on the ropes. So it's knocked out a lot of the Ukrainian economy. It's knocked out a lot of the Ukrainian industry. Without NATO aid, it's fair to say Ukraine would have gone under, but it hasn't. It's stayed in the fight due to sheer willpower and aid. Russia likewise can't achieve a knockout blow, but it's aiming to keep Ukraine on the ropes as long as possible. Now, there's a reason for this, and the reason for this is simple. If you are fighting a war, the biggest thing that you need is money. Money, 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 money. You need money to buy weapons. Now, every government has a choice of what they allocate money to. And again, I need to be careful not to be political, so I'm just going to be talking about macroeconomics. Now, obviously, NATO has a percentage of defence spend for its countries, and it has to choose what level of defence spend each country is going to contribute at. Russia also has that, but there are less constraints. If Putin decides that he's going to spend 5% of the Russian GDP on defence, or 15%, or 20%, or 30%, then as long as Russian people stay in check and they have food, he'll be able to get away with that. And if you don't think that's true, just look at North Korea, where a regime has stayed in power despite extremely lopsided macroeconomic factors. NATO, however, has to be more careful, because if you increase the spending to 20%, say, of GDP, you are going to start hitting your own civilian economy really badly. That will upset your people. Your political party would lose the elections, and therefore there is a real balancing act for democracies in how much they spend. There is a balancing act in Russia as well, and if it got to the stage where people couldn't eat, the regime would have trouble sustaining its existence. So there is a balancing act between both sides of the conflict. Now, how does this work in practice? Well, like I said, the aim of the Russians is to keep Ukraine on the ropes. And here we're going to look at where the Geran-2 drone fits in. So bringing it back there to the model and bringing it back to the drone as a weapon. So here is the traditional air superiority, suppression of enemy air defence and destruction of enemy air defence, seed and deed concepts. So let's take it from a NATO perspective. So here we have the opposing forces AWACS flying around providing situational radar awareness. The goal of fighters like the F-22 and the 5th gen fighters is to take on those AWACS and knock them out the sky, blinding your opponent. In then goes the bombers, fighter bombers, long-range standoff bombers, B-52s, B-2 bombers, F-16s flying your seed package, your CJ models. They're firing harms, they're dropping precision-guided munitions, they're using what's called molds or decoys, and then they're trying to take out the radars, predominantly, blinding systems, and then the SAM systems themselves, giving air superiority over the battlefield, knocking out the enemy's chance to deny them the airspace. So that's a traditional air superiority campaign in action. So what you'd say then is, well, if Russia knows all of that, and they do, because those are concepts that were developed from the Vietnam War onwards, tested out in the first Gulf War and subsequent wars in the former Yugoslavia, used again over Iraq in 2003, used again in Libya, used in pretty much every Western campaign since the development of radar and the wild weasels. So this is known to Russia. So why is Russia not doing it? Well, some people say, oh, they're incompetent. They're a great threat to us, but they're incompetent. But they're still a threat. Well, they're kind of missing the Russian approach to war here, and they're missing the reality, I believe, because you could quite easily escalate. You could launch seed and deed packages over Ukraine, but you would have found that you are fighting those seed and deed campaigns with one hand behind your back. And this is why the radar assets, the NATO radar assets, are behind a wall of Article 5. So if Russia attacked an AWACS and shot it out of the sky, they would be provoking an escalation and a potential war with NATO. If they shot an RQ 4B drone out of the sky, they'd be provoking a potential war with NATO. The NATO AWACS assets operate over Poland, Romania and the Black Sea, along with the ISTAR assets. They're protected by Article 5. What that means is when Russia is launching bombs, drones, missiles and air attacks into Ukraine, the radar picking them up. MQ-9B Reapers over the Black Sea, Global Hawk surveillance drones, J-Stars mapping the battlefield. The NATO ISTAR assets are impressive. What that means is that Ukraine doesn't necessarily need to activate its Patriot radars till it knows where the threat's coming in. Because if you have your radars running all the time, you're extremely vulnerable to attack. The idea with a surface-to-air missile system radar is that you turn it on when you need it. You turn it on at the last minute. If you know where the attacks are coming in from, you can calibrate your defence system and react accordingly. This isn't secret stuff. This is open source material. This has been known by people that fight wars since the late 1960s. And if they didn't know it, then they obviously weren't watching Great Plains in the Discovery Channel. Now, NATO has other assets. They have the S-1850 radar from Thales. They have the AN-TPY-2. And they have the Theatre High Altitude Defence System. Again, this is open source material. Just go look at these systems and you'll find that they're very capable radars. NATO has a significant advantage in ISTAR. It knows what it's doing. So you have bombs, you have drones, you have missiles, incoming Russian attacks into Ukraine, early warning, data links, turn on the radars, pick out the threats and deal with them, preserving your own radars from attacks. So let's have a look at how Russia is countering that. Well, what Russia's doing with the help of Iran, the Iranians say it's a Russian developed drone, is they are seeking to attrit the Ukrainian air defences. So they're launching batches of these drones, followed by cruise missiles. Here we have the Russian Kh-59. They're using Iskander missiles, using Kinzhal hypersonic-ish missiles. They're using Kh-101 cruise missiles. They're using Kh-69 cruise missiles. They're using really old Kh-22 missiles. So why are they using the Geran-2 drone? Well, they're using the drone as a form of attrition. They're launching barrages after barrage of these drones. They're launching Kh-22 missiles, repurposed, just cheap throwaway missiles. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to overwhelm the Ukrainian air defences. So the role of the Geran-2 is to fly in swarms, drone swarms. Here's a Geran-2 coming into a target you have to defend. There's 31 of these in each swarm. Then behind that you've got a Kh-59 coming in. You've got Iskanders, you've got Kinzhals. If the Russians are lucky and they're really going after a Patriot, they may fire a Kh-31. Unlikely, but it's an option. And then if they were really feeling lucky, they might send a jet closer in with a Kh-29. Very unlikely. But the purpose of the drone is to distract and cause the Patriots to be wasted. So if you're wasting all of your Patriots, your Iris-Ts, and you're wasting your NASAMs on these drones, coming in loads of them, you might not have anything left when the cruise missiles come in. So the idea is that these drones and the older cruise missiles, simply throw away. If they hit the target, good. If they don't hit the target, not a loss. The ones the Russians actually want to hit the target are their cruise missiles. So they are using these drones to burn through the resources of the Ukrainian air defence. And they're doing that for a specific reason. The reason they're doing that, and we'll take a look at what is being used against them. So here we go. Here we have the various missiles. Now I couldn't get an Iskander, and I haven't been able to get a Kinzhal missile, unfortunately, in 1 in 72nd, and no one makes a Kh-69. So what's going on here? Well, we've got the Patriot Pack 3. This is a CRI. The new one in service is the MSE, an improved product. We've got the AIM-120 missiles from the NASAMs, the AIM-9X missiles from the NASAMs, and we've got the Iris-T missile systems. So you've got the Geran-2 drones coming in, swarms of these drones, Patriots going up. This is a CRA, a hit to kill interceptor. One hit, it has to hit, kill the drone, take it down. You've got the AIM-120s going up. They're trying to take on the Geran-2 Shahid drones. AIM-9X, Iris-T, all trying to do the same thing to take on these drones. In the same way that Russia has these systems to attack, NATO also has these systems to attack, but we're focusing right now on defence. Now, the whole problem with this approach for NATO, and the reason that the Russians are using that Geran-2 drone, is they're using it because of unit cost. So let's have a look at the unit cost of some of these weapons. So the Shahid Geran-2 drone costs around $14,000 US. AIM-120 from the NASAMs, 1.9 million. Patriot Pack 3, this is a CRI, but the MSE is pretty much an improved version, 4.1 million per missile. AIM-9X, getting cheaper now, 381,000 per missile. Iris-T, German made, European made I should say, 430,000 per missile. Shahid, Geran-2, $14,000. I'll let those numbers sink in. That's why they're using them. All of the systems ranged against the Geran-2 or the Shahid-136. cost many times more. Many times more. Russia is seeking to burn out the will of NATO and the countries that support it and deal an economic blow to the support for Ukraine. So every time that you have 31 of these coming in, or maybe on a big raid, 60 of these coming in, imagine it takes a combination of 20 or 30 each of these weapons to take down that 60 odd drone swarm. It's a war of attrition. These cheap drones are burning out the Ukrainian air defence system. They're doing what Russia can't do without escalating towards World War III via attrition. They're seeking to compel Ukraine to do their will by disarming the air defence system by attrition. Unit cost. Now, let's have a look at NATO weapons, and a lot of people talk about the Storm Shadow Scalp. The ADM-160 MALD, which is the system for decoying air defences, 120,000 per unit, US dollars. The HARM missile, AGM-88E, anti-radiation missile, 284,000 US dollars per missile. Precision guided munitions, the ones which require the aircraft to get closer, the JDAMs, less expensive. Scalp Storm Shadow missile, 3.19 million US dollars. So what we have here is we have a campaign by Russia to keep Ukraine on the ropes. What they're trying to do is they're trying to burn through the Ukrainian air defences. They're trying to keep Ukraine on the ropes. Every time Ukraine gets a delivery of these new missiles, they launch these drones, targets that have to be defended, burn through the stockpiles. So, how do you counter this? Well, you can keep developing more and more expensive weapon systems, but I believe the actual way to counter this is to build cheap weapons. If you want to counter a cheap weapon, you need an even cheaper weapon. If you're focused on providing Storm Shadow weapons to hit the people that are launching these, well, every time you fire one of those, you're burning 3.1 million US dollars. If you want to undermine and counter this threat, you've got to build cheap weapons. The problem is NATO can't. The first reason it can't is because of the defence industry itself. You want us to build cheap weapons? Well, cheap weapons aren't as capable as our weapons for a start. Look what our weapons can do. They can fly nap the earth, they can change their route, they can work on inertial guidance or GPS. Look, they're much more superior than these ones, and they're much more expensive. There's a profit margin in defence. There's money to be made. Cheap weapons goes against that. These are not state-controlled industries. These are private industry. You have to make a profit. So that's the first reason. Second reason why you can't is because of the technology. And this comes into resources. So, look at these. They're really basic. Oh, the chipsets on them are from 10 years ago. That's the same thing that's found in washing machines. Yeah, but it's cheap. You try and go buying Chinese chips for your Storm Shadows, you immediately run into problems because you've countered your adversary through American sanctions. I know that's not spelt right. You've sanctioned those chips. So the cheap chips, you sanctioned them. Oh, well, you can build your own chips and you can build your own technology and you can make it really cheap. But the metal price has gone up. The raw material price has gone up. The labour costs have gone up. And that's the problem. Russia and Iran are able to turn out really cheap basic weapons. NATO isn't. And that's the problem. My opinion is, if you want to counter cheap weapons, you need to stop focusing on top-end, expensive weapons and find some way of building your own drone swarms, which are cheap. Because if you're going to start hitting the production sites and you're going to start hitting the launch sites, the command and control centres that are launching drone attacks, you need to burn through the air defences on the other side. And if you're trying to burn through the air defences with very expensive technology, what will happen in the end is it will become undermining. And this, I think, is something that you can learn from the Shahid-136 and you can learn from the Geran-2 drone. That actually there is a place in modern warfare for cheap, economical, easy to build, highly dispersible, deployable, cheap weapons. So I hope that's helped kind of understand from a factual perspective, from a way that we can learn from this lovely little model. Planet models 1 in 72nd Geran-2 / Shahid-136 drone. I bought this from Hannon's. It's around £14 plus delivery. Builds very nicely. And I hope that's given a different perspective on modern warfare. Enjoy.